Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is a true crime documentary review on The Thin Blue Line. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hi, Dr. Scott. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
I'm great. We were just talking about this. We're having some more bizarre late summer, early fall weather here in LA. You've got like a little bit of respiratory stuff. I feel like I do too.
I know. So there's
not even any fires.
There's your weekly LA weather update, you guys.
Sorry.
I want to thank everyone that came out for our watch party last weekend. I feel like I owe $3.99 to everybody because of how awful the movie was, but we had a great time. Like you said, Scott, it was payment for friendship, right?
I'm telling you, like to me, that's the best investment. And here's the thing is like I had for some reason logged onto it the day before. So I paid twice for that horrible movie Supercell that we did a watch party. But I thought it was a blast. I'll tell you what was a blast. We always have fun on our watch parties.
Yeah.
But having two other podcasts involved just made it even better. The snark and the hilarity of the comments about this bad movie were just, I'm sorry, that was worth $6.
No, totally. Easily. Totally. And it was great to have Nick with his dry commentary in there. Brad, so I think you missed this. Brad couldn't join us because Brad's in Canada and we did a test the day of earlier in the day. He and Nick and I just got on and did like some random free movie. Totally worked for him. And then he goes to log on and it says, it took his payment, but it wouldn't let him log into the movie because his credit card was an American credit card. I'm like, what? I felt so bad. And he was like, this is the disaster of the evening, not the movie. So there was some glitch there.
Yeah. So just in the future, because we will continue to have these watch parties. We are already planning one for Halloween with a really, really wonderfully awful thriller movie, B-movie involving a crime and a mystery. But if you are overseas, it is possible to do the Amazon watch parties. You just have to make adjustments in your Chrome browser that hide your country of origin. So it's not necessarily illegal. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying that it's possible to do it if you were. But anyway,
Google it.
Thanks for showing up, folks. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
So last week was episode 156, Fast and Furious Road Rage. And we explored the increasingly deadly phenomenon of road rage on primarily U.S. highways. We don't really see this so much in other countries. Of course, we go heavy into the most recent research. We discuss some really tragic cases, and we end with a few valuable tips for decreasing the likelihood that you'll get caught in one of these very dangerous dilemmas.
Indeed. Please go listen if you had not checked it out already. So what are we watching, listening, reading all this month? I really want to put a shout out there to, of course, Javier of the Pretend podcast. He does such good work, and I had talked previously about one of his other series that he did on Frank Abagnale, but he has a series that is not, I'm totally late to the game. But they're still developing stories on this. It's called The Stalker. You guys, I don't want to give it away. It is such a weird twist and turn about a couple that is being cyber stalked. It gives you the vibes of like that movie, The Watcher, and that real life story that happened. And Javier is just so lovely in being able to communicate with this family and try and figure out and help them see what's going on. And it turns into the most wild story that I'm like hesitating because I don't want to give it away, that covers some topics that we have covered here on LA Not So Confidential in terms of some psychiatric concerns. So please go listen to that. There are updates. If you haven't listened, you don't know what the heck is happening, do not go on Javier's social media because you'll see that there's actually some arrests that have been made. And
so no spoilers.
Yeah,
right?
You don't want to spoil it for sure. Totally worth your listening time. He's just so great at what he does. Such a good investigative journalist. And other than that, I think, I've just been nerding out on Ahsoka on Disney Plus. It is,
oh my gosh,
so good. Just so well done with this almost all female driven cast. Does it right. Like the character development is wonderful. Everyone is just subtle and just into their character in the best way. I'm loving it. So
yeah, no, I am a huge fan of Rosario Dawson
she's so
anyway,
good.
and
Yeah.
this is an amazing screen adaptation of the storyline. I mean, I was never, please don't send me hate mail for this. I was never a huge Star Wars fan. I was always like a Trekker because I grew up on the original series. But these independent series like Mandalorian and Ahsoka,
Yeah.
also, they're amazing how they're filling out the whole series that makes it more interesting to me. All the political intrigue
Oh,
and
yeah.
machinations are really wonderful. Wheel of Time is back for their second season. So I'm
Oh,
totally fantasy nerding out on this. Rosamund Pike is the lead character in it, and she's an actress that absolutely terrifies
I
me
know.
because when she plays a bad character, I mean, she's absolutely chilling. There's something about the quality of her eyes that actually is just very frightening for me.
Yes.
And here she is playing a wonderful, positive character, but very complex and very, very interesting take on this classic Robert Jordan fantasy series. You know, Rosamund Pike, if you don't remember, she was in Gone Girl, which
Yeah.
I thought it was a really great movie. The book also was like one of the most challenging and entertaining things to read because you just don't even know what's real and what's not real when you're
Yeah.
listening to it.
And I Care a Lot. Remember, we've covered that she was in. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
that one. And that whole issue is really, if you've lived with parents that slowly are starting to, you know, lose their cognitive functioning, it really, that show can really punch you badly.
Yeah.
But I've not been listening to a lot of other stuff besides that because, just as a little teaser, we are working on an LA NSC, LA Not So Confidential project that we're going to have more details on early in 2024. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to tell you guys about it.
I know. We're going to try and fit it in there somewhere, but we're really like, this is something we've been talking about for a long time, and we're really trying to make some headway on it for reals this time. All right. So, getting into our documentary of the month, we have the OG of all true crime documentaries, The Thin Blue Line, which is a 1988 American documentary film by Errol Morris. And just listen to this movie poster tagline. Like, I don't know how long taglines were in the 80s, but this is what's on the poster. A softcore movie, Dr. Death, a chocolate milkshake, a nosy blonde, and the Carol Burnett show. Solving this mystery is going to be murder. So they're really trying to get people into this film. And actually, I had done in some of my research, they were talking about how they actually wanted to market it less like a documentary and kind of pull people in like this was a murder mystery to be solved. So,
and guess who was involved in that?
Harvey Weinstein.
Absolutely. So you can see why they would go for the most salacious, because it's none of those things. It's all of the things in that list, and yet nothing like that at all.
Oh, yeah. No, totally.
Right.
I had to watch it through a second time to make sure I caught all of those little things that they're trying to leave as breadcrumbs. But it has some astounding Rotten Tomatoes scores. It has, for Rotten Tomatoes, it's 100%. And then for the audience score, it's 90%. So very impressive stats. Like our last doc, we haven't always covered documentaries that have the best stats. Doesn't matter. We still, love what we love.
We can tell you what not to watch.
Right. Well, we have certainly done that too, but this one is different.
So we, Dr. Shiloh and I were talking about this this morning, right before we started recording, and we want to give you guys a heads up on something. And my commentary right now emerges out of conversation with a couple of our Patreon members, which again, I feel like I'm the happiest man in the world because of our Patreon members. We just have the best, who shared with us like their reaction to this term, Thin Blue Line. So here we were preparing for just a documentary review about the OG true crime documentary, which really, when you see it, when you watch it, you will understand why it inhabits this particular space. But then, the more we thought about it, and we just realized we have to spend some time on the term itself and pulling that apart and talking about how it has in the past 30 years become this very complex symbol. I mean, It's a statement, it's a tagline, it's a slogan, but it has become something else, like many things that kind of lose control of their own original meaning. But we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to start out with just giving you a brief overview about the Thin Blue Line. It is about the trial and conviction of Randall Dale Adams for the 1976 shooting of a Dallas police officer named Robert W. Wood. The director, Errol Morris, became interested in this case while he was actually doing research for a completely different film. His film was going to be on Dr. James Grigson, a psychiatrist known in Texas at that time as Dr. Death. He was known as Dr. Death because he testified with quote unquote 100% certainty of defendants' recidivism rates in many, many trials, including that of Randall Adams. So again, I mean, somebody needs to go out there and do a full-on series about this horrible man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I'm going to try and not go on a tangent about
we dedicate a
fucked
little
up
bit
he
more
is.
time to him later, and I have some
Right.
great resources if people want to read more.
Yeah, and maybe at some point we can go a little bit further into it. But the Thin Blue Line documentary has a really specific style that allows this whole story to unfold on its own without a narrator. And while that's not uncommon today, this is the type of documentary that really requires your full attention. You know, I highly encourage people to maybe even turn on the subtitles, because you're given so much information, but you don't realize how much information you're being given as you're listening to it. And there's also this wonderful thing that's not only on Amazon Prime, but several other shows that you can use the X-ray feature. They call it different things on different platforms, but you can pause it and you'll see the name of the person like pulled from IMDb. It'll be thrown up on your screen. It's very cool. So after you get the initial introduction to the main characters in this documentary, the story quickly turns to a really complex mess of accusations, like complete hapless alleged murders, grifters, and what is wildly unethical, incompetent, and smug representatives of the legal system in 1980s Texas. I mean, it's astounding what you see.
It really is. I mean, I think watching this, you can't help but put yourself in the place of the defendant and the suspect and just realize how he had no chance.
Right.
I mean, you have these men that have been in these positions for a very long time, quote unquote, serving justice on their terms, and nothing was going to get in the way of that. Thank God for Errol Morris taking interest in this with his creative eye, because it was really something. So, but with that, let's put a pin in the documentary, and we're about to go on a really big sidebar here, so please bear with us.
Yeah, there's a good reason for this, like you said earlier. So take it away. Let's go.
Yeah. We wanted to take a bit of time here to talk about the concept of the Thin Blue Line. And we want to talk about it as a concept, as a cultural symbol, and the evolution of what it has unfortunately become associated with in modern times. Because when I did prompt our Patreon members, I just thought, okay, this is going to be a safe, very professional, appropriate place for me to post this question, because I feel like they know us, better than anyone else. And it's not going to go off the rails like maybe if I had put this on X or something like that. But we got some very thoughtful feedback. And all I said was, hey, what comes to mind for you when you hear the term Thin Blue Line or just blue line? So here's some of the responses. We're keeping these anonymous, and I promised them that we would. So one is, quote, "It makes me think that it's about a combination of walking a fine line and the police. So maybe police abuse of power or discretion." Another Patreon member said, "To be quite frank, I associate the phrase Thin Blue Line with right-wing nutters. For example, the kind of people who storm the Capitol. If I see Thin Blue Line in someone's social media or as a bumper sticker on their car, it's a signal to me that there's someone I want to stay away from. I'm sure the documentary from 1988 is more nuanced, but in today's world, Thin Blue Line to me means I'm someone who supports an authoritative, totalitarian police state. But the phrase Thin Blue Line just rubs me the wrong way." And then we had another Patreon member that added, "The Thin Blue Line has always reminded me of the blue wall of silence, like maybe police are willing to cross the line or something." So I think this is a great snapshot of perhaps how some people think about this and what it brings up for them. I had a conversation with a good friend of ours, good friend of the show, Jim, who is a police detective. He's the one that was featured in the Cecil Hotel documentary. And we have really great, courageous conversations all the time about things like this. And I was just telling him, hey, this is the documentary that Scott and I are reviewing. He's like, oh, are you going to go into the term? And I said, actually, I think I'm dedicating a lot of time to the term. We want to bring the roots of the term out and just kind of follow to where it's gotten to today and why folks might have some of these perceptions in their head, like we got out of our Patreon members. And clearly that's not representative of everyone, but it's out there. So we have to at least be aware of it and acknowledge it. So thank you, Scott, for going on this ride with me today. So here we go. So when we look at history, the term is actually derived from a different color, the thin red line, which was a term coined to represent a formation of the 93rd Highland Regiment of Foot of the British Army at the Battle of Balaclava in 1854, in which the Scottish Highlanders stood their ground against a Russian cavalry charge. So you can tell this goes very far back. And one of the earliest known uses of the phrase thin blue line is from a 1911 poem by Nels Dickman Anderson titled The Thin Blue Line. In the poem, he utilizes the phrase to refer to the United States Army, hearkening back to the original thin red line concept from 1854, and signaling the fact that the U.S. Army soldiers wore blue uniforms from the 18th century through the 19th century.
So it isn't definitively known when the term was first used to refer to law enforcement, specifically police officers in the United States, the majority of whom wear dark blue uniforms. But of course, there are departments who wear green, tan, white, light blue, across the spectrum. In 1922, New York Police Commissioner Richard Enright used the phrase in a public relations speech when he was facing criticism of his leadership. And then after that, the term started spreading around law enforcement communities in the U.S. And then in the 1950s, Los Angeles Police Chief Bill Parker often used the term in speeches explaining that the thin blue line represented the LAPD and that it was the barrier between law and order and social and civil anarchy.
Yeah, so a bit dramatic. It almost sounds like he's perhaps vying for more police funding or something by preying on the fears of those that fear crime and crime getting out of control, something we hear every once in a while from politicians and city leaders around the country here. Came up for me that it's almost a little akin to Jack Nicholson's speech in A Few Good Men, right? Where I'm not going to butcher it because I can't remember it, but he talks about the men that stand at their posts and protect civilians from the enemy, like very powerful way of thinking and saying, you really, really need us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, without going out on even a further tangent, I'll just observe that this is a very limited, concrete example of binary thinking that reinforces this us versus them mentality. And, in some cases, absolutely, it is an us versus them, but you can't look at the bigger picture if you're completely looking at things in binary terms. Rigid thinking does not leave room for the multitude of factors that contribute to crime and to the multitude of factors that would contribute to preventing crime. So Chief Parker also lent the phrase to a department-produced television show called The Thin Blue Line, and that was basically a weekly panel show where he would discuss policing issues with a panel and then take questions from that audience. And then in the 70s and 80s, author and police officer Joseph Wambaugh helped to further popularize the phrase with his police novels. Then, in 1988, the term was used for the title of Errol Morris's documentary, The Thin Blue Line. So he takes it from one of the characters, and I will control my rage at this particular character, but we'll talk more about why I hate him so much. He takes it from Judge Don Metcalf, the judge who presided over the trial of the main character of this documentary, Randall Adams. And Don Metcalf is interviewed extensively in the doc, and he states in the film that prosecutor, and this is a quote, Doug Mulder's final argument was one that I'd never heard before, about the thin blue line of police that separate the police from anarchy. And Judge Don Metcalf in that moment reports that it brought a tear to his eyes. And it's a minor sidebar. This judge is the smarmiest, most it's disturbing how remarkably self-assured this person is of his own ignorance. It's amazing.
Indeed. And you think you have to remember these people are being interviewed for a documentary and they're still just vomiting at the mouth like this. So, which we see a lot in these documentaries. So in just taking a little break here to, if I can interject kind of personally, being a former police officer, coming from a law enforcement family, what role this term has even played in my life. So I was a cop in the early to mid 2000s. And really this term was not very present for me at all. There was, there There were no blue line flags. There was no like merch like you see now. There was nothing like that. And perhaps I had heard about the term, but maybe it was from the documentary. But when I started to hear about the term, to me, I mean, maybe I was taking it too literally, but really it was for me like, hey, we're here. We are kind of around the city where you need us, and there's a presence there, right? We will absolutely protect you when you need it, and we're a first line of defense should the shit hit the fan. But we should be so thin that we're not like in your face all the time, like, you know, maybe some other countries who have a very high profile, prolific like military presence, right? So it's like we're there when you need us. We're going to do our job and be proactive as well, but you shouldn't have to think about us all the time or see us all the time. So that was always my interpretation of this thin blue line that's there, but it's not this giant wall of a police presence hovering over you. So I don't know how and when that kind of came into my purview, because like I said, it wasn't really prevalent like it is now. So I thought it would be worth going into a little bit just about cultural symbols and how that play. I mean, you know, this is a much bigger conversation we could have. I've done entire presentations in, you know, different professional conferences about us versus them, and specifically policing and in groups and out groups and all of that. And we cannot dive into all of that today. But I thought, you know, if we look at cultural symbols, however anyone is listening to this is feeling, like just think about the in groups that you are a part of. And with that, what starts off as sometimes a saying eventually can get turned into a visual symbol at some point. And we know that symbols are the absolute basis of all cultures, all subcultures. And a symbol can be an object, a word, an action that stands for something with really no natural kind of relationship to what it stands for. So, and it's culturally defined. So think of like a crown. When you think of a crown, do you think of royals? When you think of an olive branch, what does that symbolize to you, right? Like an abstract topic. Skull and crossbones, kind of universal. So you know not to drink something that's in a container, no matter where you are and what the other language has on there. So symbols are very, very important, and they're very important in shaping culture, because symbolism leads to the concept of layers of meaning, whereas culture is meaning that is shared throughout the group to provide guiding principles for our own individual meaning. Like, how do I fit in this? What's my role? How do I want to act and behave? And symbols are also useful for giving different cultures clues to guidelines around that culture, and to strengthen cohesiveness is really, I mean, if we want to take like a evolutionary psychological perspective on this, making your group cohesive and protected is really important. So again, I kind of encourage you to think about your own in groups. What sort of symbols do you have? What rituals do you have? What language do you use? I mean, we can even say, you know, hardcore followers of LA Not So Confidential are their own subgroup, right? Like, we're on our watch party the other night and they're like, Scott, you can't leave without saying, okay, folks, goodbye, right? Like, it was just like a thing that's us and symbolizes that they really know it's you on the other side of that chat room. So I think when we step away and kind of go, okay, what kind of different groups do I belong to? And how do we use symbolism to sometimes trauma bond together, to laugh together, to grow more cohesive? We can kind of see how this started out, and then you and I are going to get into where it's gone.
Yeah, about how it can easily be co-opted by a splinter subgroup or another interpretation. Again, like you were saying, just to highlight that it's all about interpretation, and that can go in a good direction and it can go in a not so good direction as well. But let's jump to more recent issues around the blue line as a symbol. Earlier this year, a police chief of a large agency in the U.S. issued a ban on displaying the thin blue line flag at public events and in station lobbies. And so why the strong stance? Well, it all stemmed from a complaint that was made by a member of the community who saw the flag displayed in a police station, and they believed that the symbol signified support of extremist views such as those espoused by the Proud Boys. So I'm sure you know what we're talking about. The flag in question is a black and white colored U.S. flag with a single blue stripe in the middle. There's also a version where instead of white stripes, it's either gray, silver gray, or reflective gray.
Right.
There are other versions, one that has a red line in the middle for firefighters, yellow line for dispatchers, green lines for correctional staff or military or federal agents.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not that big of a fan just personally of modifying the American flag in any way. So an altered flag has never been something that I've personally wanted to possess or use. And I've had a lot of conversations with many, many cops who feel the same way,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
if they're veterans.
Yeah. Well, look, changing the colors or the design of the flag is a violation of U.S. Code Section 700, which states the flag of the United States shall be 13 horizontal stripes, alternate red and white, and the union of the flag shall be 50 stars, white in a blue field. And that goes for use in clothing, but no one ever seems to have a problem with, wearing shorts that basically allow you to sit your ass on the flag.
It's
But
interesting.
I want to frame this like First Amendment rights are the basis, one of the foundational concepts of freedom in this country. And you're allowed to do what you want to the flag,
Yeah.
either respect it or not respect it. And I completely support that, because that represents your personal experience or your in-group experience of what the flag may be doing to you most positively or negatively.
Mhm.
But you can't, I just see people playing both sides of the middle. Like, right, I'm a patriot, but I'm going to take the foundational emblem of our country and I'm going to like make it specifically to my subgroup, right?
Yeah, for sure. I've been given patches from cops from other countries in which now their flag is also modified to be black, white
Wow.
with the blue line motif. I have one from Scotland that I got pretty recently. But I also, somewhere down the line, started to associate the thin blue line symbolism with memorializing those who had died in the line of duty. So there's a week in the year that we called National Police Week, where we go back to Washington, D.C. There's a lot of honoring the officers who have died in the line of duty that year before, a lot of ceremony, a lot of pomp and circumstance, going to Arlington Cemetery to do some ceremonies and honor officers who are also veterans. So when I would, for that week, I've only been back to Police Week once, but I would get my nails painted like a neutral color. And then just on one nail, I would get a thin blue line painted on there. And for me, it was like, okay, this is a little bit of symbolism that someone can see that I'm acknowledging that I take this week very seriously and paying homage to, personal friends that I've lost in the line of duty. So there's, again, a lot of nuance to symbolism, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this just isn't here in the U.S., like you were saying, and the altered flag has become a source of pride in being part of or supporting law enforcement, just as the altered red flag would be in support of firefighters.
Yeah, but I think like half the people driving around on the freeways with that little blue line flag on the back of their windshield are probably just trying not to get a ticket. I support you.
That's actually a really good point. I never thought about that because, I'm a hyper cautious person anyway. I would never put a sticker on my car other than like a specialized Disney plate holder, like the one that had the silver holder that has the castle on it. That's probably the most I've ever put on my car. And I'll tell you why. For one thing, I don't need to advertise that. And because I work in emergency services, it's like, I don't want anybody knowing anything about me from my car. It's why people need to stop putting family stickers on their car that indicate how many kids are in your family. That is just like
and what their names are and what sports they play and what school they go to.
Not advisable at all, folks. You do you, but I don't think that's advisable. But I remember, look, when at the 2 election cycles ago, I was in support of Hillary. I know that she's a controversial figure, maybe even for some of our listeners, but I wasn't going to put that sticker on my car because there was a rash. People were getting their tires slashed around LA because of that. But I digress. The problem with the blue flag is in more recent times is it has become very divisive in its symbolism. And again, that's springing from what you were saying earlier about these subgroups. And as you get a subgroup within a subgroup within a subgroup, there's going to be more individuated belief and attachment of meaning. But going back to that chief, he banned the flag in public spaces. He put out this statement in part, and this is the quote: "It's unfortunate that extremist groups have hijacked the use of the thin blue line flag to symbolize their undemocratic, racist, and bigoted views. Flags serve as a powerful symbol with specific meanings. The thin blue line flag, to me, represents the honor, valor, dedication, and sacrifice of law enforcement to protect our communities. Tragically, that view is not universally held, and others have been able to persuade the public it symbolizes racist, bigoted, and oppressive values. Given that our lobbies should be places that people feel safe, free of political ideology, and welcoming, it remains our longstanding policy that only official items be displayed," close quote. So, I think he has a really good point, because there are a lot of extremist groups that allegedly align themselves with law enforcement. They're not, but they're not. They're not on. They're aligning themselves with authoritarian stances.
Yes. Good
And
point.
they're assuming that everybody that is a policeman has the same views as they do. And I can tell you, folks, they don't. They absolutely don't.
No, they do not, for sure. And just to back up a bit more for some more context, the blue line flag started gaining popularity sort of as this merch item that I was talking about when the Blue Lives Matter concept emerged in around 2014 as a response to law enforcement feeling particularly defensive at the time, or that they were just kind of losing support in general. Again, horrible choice of a slogan, in my opinion, because it can only feel at odds with Black Lives Matter. I mean, almost mockingly so, right? It completely adds to the notion of us versus them. So thereby, this all exacerbated tensions between law enforcement officers and the civilian population. And around this time, 2014 on up to 2016, you had the backdrop of the bigger BLM movement growing in response to the deaths of Eric Gardner and Michael Brown Jr. at the hands of police. But you also had multiple police officers shot to death in Baton Rouge, Brooklyn, Dallas, some in straight up ambushes or active shooter situations like Dallas, where 5 officers were killed in one night. So needless to say, this is a snapshot in time where tensions were very, very high.
Yeah, tensions were high, and many people were unwilling to have complex conversations about why that term felt like it was mocking. And then it's like, and then to further divide it, that it was all lives matter. Well, yes, all lives matter. And yes, but like, we need to make time in this space to acknowledge that Black communities were having a particular experience that was brutal and oppressive and needed to be recognized and separated. As I think you used the term correctly, it really felt mocking. So to add more complexity and danger to this paradigm, white nationalists have continued to prominently display thin blue line flags during their rallies. And then they're flying it right next to a Confederate flag in 2017 at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. The thin blue line flag was observed during the January 6th United States Capitol attacks, during which individuals who stormed the Capitol engaged in acts of violence against law enforcement officers. We have audio, video. Some of the officers didn't make it.
Yeah, I'm going to hold this flag while I'm bashing a cop in the face with a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, it's jaw dropping, jaw dropping.
It is. So we know this is part of a much larger conversation. But again, we thought a great opportunity to talk about the history, address why some have a very proud reaction to it and others have a disgusted reaction to the term or to the symbol. So thank you for letting us take up probably half the episode on that. And we are open and welcome to comments and continue conversation about this. So let us know if you're interested, or if you're like, nope, just please get to the damn documentary. I'll put a timestamp in the show notes. Well, it's too late for you guys to know that, but if you just want to forward through all of this nonsense. But thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having this conversation with me, Scott.
No. I appreciate it. I think that that's one of the things that makes our show unique, is that we inhabit this space where we're willing to have these conversations, and we do get some very passionate pushback. And, I always want to try and inhabit this space where I'm respectful of what somebody's reaction is. But I'm always going to say, can we continue the conversation? Let's never say, but let's say, and, let's continue the conversation. And we're going to move on to the actual documentary.
Let's do it.
How is that for a transition? Okay. The Thin Blue Line was released in 1988, and it is highly regarded to this day for its meticulous investigation and a quite compelling narrative, but non-narrative storytelling. The documentary delves into the case of Randall Dale Adams, a man wrongly convicted of murder in Dallas, Texas. It unfolds and drives with nothing but a few reenactments, interviews with a chyron introducing the person's name, but little else. No narrator, no listening to the person answering the questions. It is really woven together beautifully. It was shot and created in the time prior to digital camera recording. And as a film shot on 35 millimeter stock, it has a grainy, gritty feel that feels both intentional and unintentional to me. As an audience member, you witness an opening shot of a police car's flashing blue lights against the night sky. And if you're unfamiliar with the story, you can quickly be pulled into this just riveting exploration of a true miscarriage of justice. So the movie features a sequence of interviews that center on the investigation into the shooting of Dallas police officer Robert Wood. The film also includes dramatizations of the crime itself, all the versions that are allegedly what happened, as well as what likely happened. And this reenactment is based on accounts and memories of various individuals involved. So just an overview of the names that it included is Adams, who is the alleged killer, Harris, who I'm not giving anything away. He is the perpetrator of it. And believe me, this is not even a spoiler because you'll be shocked at how this proceeds. Then there's Judge Donald Metcalf, several witnesses like Emily Miller, R.L. Miller. Emily Miller is the nosy blonde.
Oh my God, Emily.
And detectives Gus Rose, Jackie Johnson, and Marshall Tootin. Additionally, two attorneys, Edith James and Dennis White, who represented Adams during the trial where he was found guilty, make appearances in the film. They argue that Adams was charged with the crime despite overwhelming evidence pointing to Harris as the perpetrator, but that was pushed aside because Harris was a juvenile at the time, which in the big picture makes all of this even more chilling for what happened.
Yeah, indeed.
But it seemed to law enforcement at the time and to the judicial system at the time that Adams, as an adult, would be more easy to convict, and he would potentially receive the death penalty under Texas law. So the minor would not be eligible for death penalty. It's very interesting. The film does not feature the prosecutor, Douglas D. Mulder, and after you've watched the whole thing, you'll understand why.
Yeah, maybe he was the smartest guy in the whole bunch. So immediately, right off the bat, we're introduced to two men, both being interviewed back and forth from prison. You have Randall Dale Adams, who's a soft-spoken and unassuming man who in 1977 found himself at the center of this murder trial that would change the course of his life completely. He calmly talks us through how he ended up in Dallas and how he crossed paths with a 16-year-old man named David Ray Harris. He's got three first names, so I don't know. I think right off the bat, you're like, he's the guy.
Southerners, yeah. At least his middle name wasn't Wayne. There was a whole thing. And in News of the Weird for years, it was like, okay, there's another middle name, Wayne, who's committed a crime.
Yep. Harris is disturbingly calm throughout this. He is, like I said, he's being interviewed from prison, so he is very disinterested in how he tells his story. Didn't it give you vibes of like a lot of the more ASPD offenders we've worked with? Like,
absolutely. In fact, if I would say that this is probably one of the best textbook examples of someone with true ASPD.
Just like so disinterested to be there, kind of bored, like kind of acting like they're bored, like, no big deal. But yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's just the stark difference between these two men is just so obvious. But he really fills us in on his extensive teenage history of criminal behavior. So we're first brought into our first reenactment of the crime, and it's after we're introduced to those two characters, but it shows how in the early evening of November 28, 1976, Dallas police officer Wood was shot and killed during what seemed to be a routine traffic stop in a suburban area of Dallas, but also area known for its high crime. And he had a female police officer as his partner that night, and they had simply pulled over a car, very likely for a minor traffic violation, but it quickly went sideways.
So the case led to the arrest of Randall Adams approximately 1 month after the shooting. Randall is immediately taken to interrogation by his account, where a confession document is ready for him to sign, and he refuses. Adams claims the investigator tried all sorts of threats and tactics, including putting a gun on the table in front of him and telling him to pick it up while he pulls his own service weapon on Adams. The things that Adams is saying are so outlandish, and yet his delivery is calm but not disinterested. It is
Agree.
like, even after all these years, it's probably 9-10 years later that he's being interviewed for this, there comes across as like, you're not going to believe this shit I'm telling you. Like this is so wild what this guy did to me. And of course the detectives tell a different story, talking about building rapport, and that Adams completely lacks remorse, and they accused him of over protesting his innocence, which is just,
he's innocent.
yeah, he's over protesting, but they never allowed him to phone or call an attorney. It's very interesting, his reports of how the interrogation was done, because it really does feel like the individuals who were doing his attempted interrogation and evaluation were patterning their behaviors off of television and movie versions of Hard Ass Cops.
Well, and I don't doubt that they were just doing that. Like they had done that a million times before.
Right. And I think that the acuity in this case is higher because it is a police officer who's been killed. And it's
Totally.
we got to wrap this up. It's got to be quick. And that is what is the predominant drive for finding a suspect and pinning it on them, is because we got to close this case. So investigators sort of have this theory that Officer Wood and his partner were not going to write the driver a ticket and had no idea that the car that they were pulling over was stolen. Officer Wood looks so young in the pictures that they show. He's a young, put together, really proud looking Hispanic male in his uniform. They note that his wife had just purchased him a bulletproof vest for Christmas and had it wrapped under the tree for him.
Tragic.
Heartbreaking point that they make.
Yeah, it really is that, this was just like, hey, I'm going to give someone a warning. And here he got shot, which this doesn't happen every single day, but it happens. And again, like officer safety, of course, we have totally different rules about wearing vests and policies about that, but it goes to show you the danger of the quote unquote routine traffic stop. Right. So we know a lot of how it happened that night because of Officer Wood's partner. So she was one of the first female patrol officers that they, allowed to go out on patrol. Up until then, female police officers were working inside, maybe working as following up with detectives and things like that. But she was on patrol with him, and they had just gone to get a milkshake at Burger King and saw the car with two men in it with no lights on. And as Officer Wood approached the car, the driver turned slightly around right as he's coming up on him and shot him in the arm, the chest, and eventually the head. And Officer Teresa Turco fired at the fleeing car and went to render aid before getting on the radio to call for help, right? So they only had radios back in the cars in those days. You had to run back to the car to radio into dispatch, but she fired at the car, rendered aid to her partner. And there's a little bit made about like her reaction in that moment, which I thought was interesting because you have some like commentary from detectives going like, well, like she should have probably radioed for help to get people there. And then you had another detective that I thought was pretty great in saying, think about what this woman's going through. Like her partner is just murdered in front of her eyes. Like, of course, she's not going to have the wherewithal to do all of our policies and procedures exactly correct.
Right.
So all they had really was a vehicle description, but she couldn't recall the license plate. I mean, they even go into like, they put her under hypnosis to try and get that plate number, but they think that probably she was just chilling, sitting in the car, drinking her milkshake, because this was going to be just a like, hey, let me give this guy a quick like warning to like turn on his lights, because there was chocolate milkshake liquid on the ground as if she had, oh shit, like tossed it out the window when she saw the shooting happened. So it's interesting how they're putting, trying to protect her, but also putting some pressure on her later in the trial. But there, like you said, there's obvious pressure to solve this case. Investigators talk about, how they had always solved previous murdered cop cases pretty quickly. And they are even talking the documentary like, it's getting close to Christmas. So what a surprise. They get a break just in time for the holidays by pinning this on Adams.
I would say that to me, the one weakness in the entire production is how little attention they pay to her, because
yeah.
And I would, to this day, I would really like to know why that was done. My theory on this, and I have no evidence on this at all, is that she was a new cop, female, which was still not common. I mean, like the smallest percentage makeup of police forces, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least at that time. And I can only imagine the amount of pressure that she was put under. And I don't mean pressure like you got to remember, I'm like, it was pressure with a finger in her face, like, we will ruin you
Oh,
unless
yeah.
you follow this narrative. Yeah. I mean, and also like hypnosis to remember something that vital. It is like, what a dumbass
Well,
approach to it.
it was still happening up until pretty recent times at some pretty
I
big
know.
agencies.
Doesn't make it any better. I mean, they do some amazing visuals as they're doing this. Is like they show sort of her POV sitting in the car and watching the back of the car, which was blue. Everybody could agree that it was blue, but they couldn't tell which model it was or what the tag number or what the tag number was. So they do this interesting thing where it's flashing between like a Dodge Dart and a something else, and then the numbers change. So I thought that was like a really arresting visual, sort of representing what she's trying to remember.
Yes.
But look, it turns out that in Vidor, a Texas car matching the description of the one involved in the shooting had been found, and they were looking at Harris for stealing the car. He had run away from home with a couple of guns and had dumped the car in Vidor. Investigators in the Vidor area had heard rumblings in the community that Harris was actually bragging about shooting the Dallas cop. And a couple of his buddies are interviewed in the documentary, and they're just clearly saying with no compunction whatsoever that Harris was bragging about the shooting, but they did all think that he was full of shit.
Yeah.
And these are some of the most legit interviews ever.
I know.
They are so believable. The detectives interview Harris, and he leads them to the swamp where he ditched the gun, and it's still there. But once Dallas homicide investigators get a hold of him, he turns around and blames Randall Adams. And then through interviews with Harris, the documentary now points to how he had manipulated the truth and falsely accused Adams to protect his own interests, saying that he was in the car with Adams when Adams shot the cop.
Yes. So as far as their stories, Adams' account is that he and Harris met when Harris saw that Adams was out of gas, right? So he stopped to see if he could help him, and they end up kind of palling around, right? So they went and they get food. They actually go to a drive-in and watch a movie. And then eventually Adams has to go back to the hotel room that he's sharing with his brother. And Harris, being this runaway juvie, is like, I have nowhere to stay. And Adams tells him, like, you can't stay here. My brother is like not going to be down with that, and turns him away, but says like, hey, I might be able to get you a job Monday morning. So if you want to come back Monday, let me know. And, they kind of part their ways. And then Adam says he goes back into the hotel room. He watches the end of the Carol Burnett show. And when he's in with investigators after his arrest, he tells them all of this. And then he ends up signing a statement to his version of events for the investigators. Well, the investigators spin that as saying that it was a confession to the murder, and they tell the media about that. And they basically, it's hard to tell whether or not he's kind of alluding to the fact that they like filled in some gaps on there, because they go, oh yeah, he tells us all the events, and then he just says he doesn't remember what happened after that, almost saying like he was having this fugue state of not remembering the murder. And that's how they kind of put out the information about this statement / confession.
Well, they also don't talk about this specifically about his forgetting, but they mentioned that they had gone to the drive-in movie, watched the last half of like a B erotic movie, and then watched the first half of another B movie. And then they were bored. They were just smoking cigarette after cigarette. They had bought a couple of 6-packs, so they were buzzed anyway.
Yeah.
So you think there's going to be a little memory impairment? I mean, your only anchor in that whole night is that Carol Burnett is on Saturday nights at 9:30 in that area. That's literally the only time anchor, plus the counts of when the movies were running. So yeah, they were really jumping not into conclusions. I think they were trying to craft a narrative. But now at this point, we're introduced to some more characters, and you're so thankful because it's like, oh great, now at least there are some smart people coming into the picture, right? You meet this lady lawyer, Edith James, and she's one of Adams's defense attorneys, along with an individual named Dennis White.
Oh my God. I love Edith James. So she reminds me of one of my favorite professors in grad school. Rest in peace, Dr. Skidmore. You were absolutely incredible and integral to my professional journey. But yeah, her partner, Dennis White, keeps referring to her as the lady lawyer. And it's so cute. I love it.
She's so affable and likable and, just on the verge of like tearing everything down,
I
because
know.
she's so smart and she knows that she's up against just a bunch of idiots. And
Yep.
and she's not nasty, which is great. But like, first of all, you would want her as your attorney. And God help you if you were on the other side of the aisle from her, because this is a woman who takes no shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, really great. So she and two other participants are really the sole voices of reason as far as defense is concerned. They talk about, once they get to Fedor to start interviews for the case, that they go, hey, this is KKK country.
Yep.
And they realize that there's a likelihood that they're being followed, and that the prosecutor had gone down to that area and told the town that they were, quote unquote, Eastern educated civil liberties lawyers, and that their intent was to implicate Harris, this poor, sweet 16-year-old lost child. Right. So he's crafted a whole narrative about them. And Edith lays it out pretty clearly. The gun and the car in question were in possession of Harris that night, but because he was 16 and a minor, he could not get the death penalty and keep the prosecutor's perfect conviction record. So they had to go with Adams, who was an adult. This plays very importantly into this whole narrative, is this prosecutor had a 100% conviction record, which is not a good thing.
You think?
Yeah.
Oh, is that possible? Yeah. So the documentary moves into the trial part of the story. And this is where we want to talk about Dr. Death, the original Dr. Death, I guess.
Okay. I'm doing deep, calming breaths.
He is another embarrassing figure in the history of forensic psychiatry, I guess is the nicest way that I can put this.
Yes.
So, as Scott had laid out before the conception of the Thin Blue Line, Morris actually planned to film a documentary about this psychiatrist. So, Dr. Grigson had testified in more than 100 trials that resulted in death sentences, and had really made a name for himself by giving testimony in capital cases for the prosecution in Texas.
So, at that time, under Texas law, the death penalty could only be issued if the jury is convinced that the defendant is not just guilty, deep breath, but they also have to be convinced that the individual will commit violent crimes in the future if they are not put to death. Have to take a break.
Right.
This is only a couple of decades ago. In almost every instance, Dr. Grigson would, after examining and evaluating a defendant, he would testify that he had found the individual in question to be an incurable sociopath who he was 100% certain would kill again. Over and over again, Grigson is doing this to individuals.
Yeah. No one was a 90%. No one was a 98%. No fucking wonder the prosecutor had a perfect record with prosecutions in death penalty cases. I mean, this is so incredibly disturbing that essentially like two men were running around like killing people, I guess.
Yeah.
They were serial killers.
So the director was able to initially interview Grigson, and during this meeting, Grigson suggested to Morris that his research should start with all the inmates he had testified against in court. So before the idea for Thin Blue Line even came up, he was like, again, like we were saying, he was going to focus on Dr. Grigson. Hey, I want to talk to you about your wonderful rate. And his response was, we'll go and interview all the people that I've helped put away and see how dangerous they are.
Yeah. How'd that turn out for him?
Yeah.
Well, and why am I not surprised that this psychiatrist is completely telling this director how to do his job?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tells you a lot about that personality constellation. But like we were saying, Morris took him up on it. And during this research, he met Randall Adams and he learned all about the case. And Dr. Grigson had told the jury that Adams would be an ongoing menace to society if he was allowed to live. Dr. Grigson's interviews, again, deep breath, his interviews with inmates often lasted less than an hour. And I mean, I want to say they were arbitrary at best, but they're really more criminal the way I'm viewing it, because the majority of his interviews, it consisted of him going in, placing a photocopy, or at that time a mimeograph copy of a series of doodles on the desk, giving the inmate another piece of paper and a pencil and telling them to copy the doodles. Like that's it. The idea, like you were saying, Dr. Shiloh, the number of people that died
Yeah.
as a result of this individual's evaluations is just horrific.
And just for context, so take a sex offender risk assessment evaluation would be at a minimum probably 4 hours. Right. So you have a clinical interview to do, you have some testing to do with that individual. So 4 hours with the person. And then you have probably another, if you're good at your job, 8 hours of doing all of the other assessments and writing out the report.
I myself in the past couple of years had to undergo an evaluation because of an experience I had at work in the work environment. And the interview alone took 6 hours.
Yep.
6-hour interview, full life history, full medical history. And then, I was given the battery of tests that we are all taught to teach, in grad school, like the basic MMPI and, not necessarily the Beck, because the Beck inventory is not used so much, but like an anxiety inventory, a depression inventory, all these things. And then it took like 2.5 months to get the results back because the individual, the evaluator has to put all this information together. So the idea that this psychiatrist was doing that, it's just horrific. And I'm sure it's an embarrassment to psychiatry because of that. But in an article on Dr. Grigson after his own death in 2004, Cynthia Orr, who was the president of the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, said this: "He had a tremendous impact on Texas death penalty litigation. He really provided ammunition to the state to try and establish one's future dangerousness when ordinarily it would have been pretty tough to do. He was willing to go further than anyone else."
Yeah. And over the years, he was reprimanded by the American Psychiatric Association, once for using the results of a competency examination against the defendant during the punishment phase of his trial, and the other time for claiming 100% accuracy in predicting how dangerous a defendant he had never examined would be in future years. So there are cases where he never examined the person.
Right.
So Paul Applebaum, a University of Massachusetts psychiatry professor who courageously filed multiple complaints against Dr. Grigson. Those complaints finally led to the APA to expel Dr. Grigson, stating that he went, quote, well beyond what science can purport to know.
And that pisses me off because that's a gentle way of saying it. That doesn't protect our field at all when you soft sell it like that, well beyond what science can purport to know. No, Dr. Grigson himself was a disordered individual that used his power to marginalize and end the lives of individuals. I don't know if they were guilty or not. I'm sure that a good portion of them were absolutely not guilty.
Yeah.
And their lives are ended and destroyed. Anyway,
I know.
So frustrating.
It would be too much. And we certainly want you to watch this documentary for yourself to go into all of the conflicting statements by all of the witnesses and the evidence on both sides. So please, we're leaving some here for you to discover on your own. But can we please comment on Mrs. Miller, AKA the nosy blonde?
Oh, Mrs. Miller.
So Mrs. Miller is a surprise eyewitness along with her husband at the end of the trial when the defense attorneys thought this was all wrapped up. Like they're walking in expecting that the jury is going to go to deliberate, and here are more witnesses being sworn in, unbeknownst to them. So talk about all shady. But Mrs. Miller claims that she and her husband that night drove right by the cop pulling over the suspect car before the cop even gets out of the car. And she testifies that she saw Adam's face as the driver. So basically you have this woman that's going to point in the courtroom and say, that's the man, right?
Yep. That I saw.
I don't think I've ever described a woman as smarmy, but oh man, this lady, bottle blonde, gobs of blue eyeshadow, very thin eyebrows, and just dead eyes, but with a shit-eaten grin on her face through the whole time she's being interviewed about. And I can just tell that the director had to do nothing. He just basically said, tell me about yourself. And she just opened up. So she starts off basically telling on herself that she always wanted to be a detective, watched tons of old detective noir movies where there's always a leading lady with the detective, and how, okay, if I wouldn't be a detective, then at least I'd want to marry a detective. It is so weird. And then she's like, I'm always watching because everywhere I go, there's killings and stuff, even around my house. I'm like, what? What is going on? So she says, I always get involved. I mean, this is straight from her mouth from the documentary. I always get involved. I always put myself in the center of what's happening around town, and even goes to say, like, I want to see if I can figure it out before the cops do. Someone that wants to be in the spotlight of crime for sure.
Yeah. So I have to be careful here because there's an overlap between somebody that we love as well, who's a good friend of ours, who is in the satire version of this documentary.
Yes,
and
yes.
we'll come back to this, but she is definitely, Ms. Miller is definitely an unlikable character. You know, it's very clear, even if I wasn't a professional, and I saw that, I remember seeing this long before I was in this field and thinking, okay, that woman's full of shit. You know, you just know that there's something really off about her. But that's not to say that there wasn't clear coercion or a potential positive consequence to her engaging in this. And that is further examined later on. So, but what's interesting is that, okay, down the line, what you find out is that her daughter, her adult daughter, was facing basically a life without parole penalty for the daughter's criminal actions.
Yep.
And they brought her in basically and said, look, we will get your daughter off her charges if you implicate this guy as the murderer. I mean, it's clearly that's what's going on. But the idea that she would revel in this presentation of implicating an innocent man and sort of her own inherent narcissism is really, it's disturbing. I mean, she's also like you were saying, like you were describing, she's quite the character with a really bad dye job and, you know, the pencil thin eyebrows of the time, but that just weird self-confidence that is way beyond what she actually is amazing. But there are other characters that are just as priceless.
Totally.
Let me tell you.
And this is the beauty of documentaries. Like, you just start a film rolling and like the realness of these people come out. So yeah, but in the end, so Adams was convicted and sentenced to death. The Texas appellate court shot down the appeal to take death off the table, but the federal Supreme Court overturned the death sentence and it was commuted to life in prison.
So this documentary continues to be historically celebrated for really a groundbreaking approach to documentary filmmaking, and then also for the incredibly significant impact that it had on the criminal justice system, not just in Texas, but literally ripples across the country. The attention paid to the infuriating smugness of the investigators and the judge assigned to adjudicate this procedure just ripped through the legal world when it premiered. Small town police agencies were suddenly looked at with a lot more scrutiny regarding their procedures. And this film lent to a meticulous investigation and presentation of evidence that ultimately led to Adams's exoneration after spending over a decade in prison. You know, the power of a documentary to do this has a huge impact on the justice system of the United States. And it's one of the reasons I think really for some of the more like unintentionally funny aspects of this documentary, I think it is really required watching for anyone that is interested in the true crime genre.
Yeah.
So yeah, this documentary basically put a beacon light on the potential for wrongful convictions. And there are three main areas of impact.
Yes, many areas, but let's focus on three here. So the most direct impact of the documentary, of course, was the exoneration of Randall Dale Adams, our main character who was wrongfully convicted of murder. Thankfully, he did not get sentenced, or he got sentenced, but thankfully he didn't get sent to death before this film came out. And this film's investigation and presentation of evidence were instrumental in demonstrating his innocence. And not only in small bits of information, but looking at a hugely problematic judicial system in Texas. As a result of this film, Randall Adams was released from prison after spending over 10 years on death row. His appellate attorney, when interviewed in this documentary, said something very chilling when talking about a saying. We're talking about sayings and symbolism, right?
Yeah.
Among Dallas prosecutors. And the saying was this: any prosecutor can convict a guilty man. It takes a great prosecutor to convict an innocent man.
Yeah, that really punches when you hear that. The film had enormous influence on increased scrutiny of eyewitness testimony, something that we've talked about in multiple episodes about how There are so many problems with eyewitness testimony. It let the professionals speak for themselves, sometimes to an embarrassing end, by highlighting the fallibility of eyewitness testimony, which is a critical component of many of these criminal cases. After this documentary, many legal professions began to explore more reliable methods for obtaining and presenting eyewitness testimony. So this was really an example of just a complete mess.
Yeah.
It was, what is the actual eyewitness testimony and what is the coerced or sort of promoted eyewitness testimony? There's another character that we didn't really get a chance to talk about that is the owner of the Quickie Mart or convenience store where Miller and her husband worked. And this woman is another take no shit Texas woman.
Yep.
She's like, well, they're just trash. She goes, don't believe anything they say. They stole from me. They were always arguing. They are not legitimate sources of information.
Yeah.
And the way she delivers it is just like so deadpan. It's
I know.
really
I
great.
love it. I love it. I wish I could have seen her testify on the stand. And so lastly, reforms in police interrogation practices. This film shed a great deal of light on the issues of police coercion during interrogations by depicting how Adams had allegedly been coerced into making this false confession / statement that got fudged around. And while his story via self-report is shocking, there's no refuting of his narrative by the interrogators, really. So increased attention on the need for reforms in police interrogation practices, including the recording of interrogations to ensure transparency and accountability, all emerged from this film. So, I mean, the impacts are just wide and vast.
Very, very far reaching. It also, aside from police work, Thin Blue Line had a significant influence on how documentaries were envisioned and produced. It broke new ground in the use of reenactments. Okay, it wasn't the first, but it was the first to use reenactments that were, for want of a better term, I would call them almost ethereal and somewhat melodramatic at times, while being underscored by this renowned and somewhat controversial composer named Philip Glass. With Philip Glass, you either love him or you hate him. He did the piano. He's got this like nonstop piano orchestration that Morris had envisioned the entire time he was making it, that Philip Glass. In fact, he had made his own cassette mixtape of Philip Glass's scores as he was editing it. And he told Glass, like, I've been doing this. And then later, when Glass basically gave him permission and yes, we will score this for you, somebody asked him, like, well, why did you choose him? And he said, because Philip Glass's music is the music of despair.
Oh.
Or is it despair or dread? He's something like despair or dread, or like,
okay.
I mean, because it's just sort of this, it never stops. It never stops. It's really beautiful. And you think, oh, this is relaxing. And after a while, you're like, okay, this is like, I'm going insane listening to this.
Wow.
So what did we learn? Is that where we're going to go next? What did we learn?
What did we learn from this? Not to get milkshakes at Burger King? I don't know.
A malted.
A malt.
Also, okay, so let's talk about, I mean, we've talked about the really horrible things that were brought to light in the Texas judicial system. That's a big deal. We're really glad that Adams was exonerated. And unfortunately, he died only a few years later. He got out of prison, was able to live a relatively uneventful, quiet, hidden life after he had a lot of back and forth with Morris about the rights to his story. So there was some miscommunication there. It doesn't seem that Morris was doing anything trying to make a buck off him, but it might have been misinterpreted by him. I wish I had more information on that, but I don't. But he died of cancer in 2010. I'm glad he was able to get, at least a decade back of his life. But I do want to talk about some more of the humorous aspects of this. So overall 100% score, but there's a several film conventions that they use that become kind of funny. They show, you hear the gunshot going off and this policeman clutching his chest. So you don't see his face, you see his torso, a hand go to his chest. And then they go to his feet. And what they were trying to convey was that the blast from the bullet spun him around as he fell. But they keep showing these blue cop trousers and black shoes doing almost this perfect ankle length, ankle height pirouette. Like suddenly there's like one foot is wrapped around the ankle of the other, and there's this slow spin as they fall. It was like very
a dancer
dramatic.
would pick that out.
Right. And then you see like probably 4 different shots of the malted being thrown in slow motion.
Yep.
So you see like this arc of chocolate milkshake over the car. And then you keep seeing the Burger King logo reflected in the hood of the car.
Yes.
And I have my own thing about Burger King. I'm sorry, maybe it'll lose the sponsors. I think Burger King is absolutely inedible. Like it's just, it's so gross.
Oh man, we're going to lose all of our sponsors now.
I'm so sorry. But so our connection to this also is our dear friend, Deb Height, my summer stock compatriot from decades ago. And she's, very much a working actress here in Los Angeles. And this was redone as a satire for the show Documentary Now. Documentary Now is brilliantly funny. It's Bill Hader, Fred Armisen, and a host of other wildly talented people, including Deb, who has managed to be in 1 or more episodes in each season.
Yeah. And John Mulaney is a writer on it too.
John Mulaney, of course, brilliant writer. But their comedy version is that Bill Hader plays smarmy Harris, and Fred Armisen plays Adams, but plays him as just like the most annoying man in the world. And so everybody wants to pin this crime on him because he's so annoying. And then there's even a version of the Nosy Blonde, this wonderful actress that you'll know because you've seen her forever in anything. Her name is Diana Dale Dickey, and she plays earthy characters really well. She was in a movie that you and I saw, Winter's Bone. She was like the meth dealer's wife.
That's right.
And anyway, she's great, but she's also got comic chops that are just so good. And I don't even want to give anything more away about it. But one of the things that we didn't touch on it's not necessarily a spoiler, but at the end of this documentary, there is a recording of Harris basically confessing to the crime. And the reason, he even gives a reason. Now he's talking in sort of third person, what if, and he says basically that the reason he did it was because he was not allowed to stay in the hotel room with them overnight, that he was so angry and upset that he was not allowed shelter for the night, that he just went out and killed somebody.
Well, and he kind of leaves it to fate. Like, it could have been different if I stayed there that night. You never know. Yeah. Like, you never know circumstances, what's going to lead to what. But it's the first time you hear the director's voice, because it's a recorded phone call with him, and he's asking him these very direct questions all these years later. Yeah. And basically says he did it. So.
And then he ends up going to prison on another murder and is put to death. And this is also somebody that had committed. The really ironic thing about Dr. Death's testimony is that, yes, as forensic psychologists, we know that past behavior does have an indication on future behavior. It's never 100% though, but it is an indication. But he refused to look at this teenager, this basically ASPD teenager who had done nothing but commit crime after crime after crime, high levels of impulsivity, sexual assaults, substance use. It's like, if you were looking for the real proof of your theories, this is the one that you would have gone to.
No kidding. So needless to say, 5 brains for both of us.
Absolutely.
It's the standard. It's really the gold standard. So if you haven't seen it, I hope you go and watch it. There's still a lot left to watch and hear and learn. And for those of you that have seen it before, I hope this was interesting and fun. And gosh, we got to figure out what our next doc will be, but we probably have to figure out what our next episodes are going to be first.
Oh, come on. We have don't lie to our listeners. Okay. You have the whole thing scheduled out.
Okay. Yeah. You guys don't know how much we fly by the seat of our pants, but there's a lot of pants flying.
But it's pretty cool. You're like, how about this? Yeah, let's do it. I'm just always like, of course,
and then we're like Kermit on the keyboard, right?
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for hanging in there with us for a longer documentary episode. And we'll see you guys next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, folks. Thanks a lot.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network in partnership with Glassbox Media. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
The LA Not So Confidential theme, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons attribution license, and you can check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Please join us each month on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on YouTube entitled Behind the Couch. Stay tuned to all of our social media for our live streaming scheduling announcements.
Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential so you never miss a new episode. And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, and you'll be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and join in with us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, folks.